Hello and welcome back. And how's your 2025 going? Have you looked out the window? It's a bit spicy out there, isn't it? Today we want to keep our feet on terra firma and return to the subject of NAS on a nice, simple topic. Is now the time to jump ship away from turnkey NAS solutions and make your way over to DIY? I have compared these two platforms, as it were, and a platform in the loosest sense, for a long time, talking about different DIY NAS solutions, looking at different turnkey NAS solutions. That is when the hardware and the software are bundled together in a complete package, and I've sort of weighed up the pros and cons. But is now the time to shift away from this? Have you matured enough away from this? Have you decided that the scope of this isn't enough and you want to get that thermal paste under your fingernails and move over to this? I'm going to give you 4 reasons that now is the time to jump ship to DIY. But at the same time, if you don't want to build your own, maybe your life just needs to be simple. I'm going to give you 4 reasons why sticking with this makes more sense. So let's crack on with number 1. When did turnkey NAS become so locked in? For a long time, I think most users would agree that going for a turnkey combined hardware software NAS solution, when I said phrases like locked, it meant that your data was locked in an ecosystem, that your data was locked into these hardwares, these ecosystems, and therefore later on when you wanted to scale up, you had to do it their way. Now, to a lesser or greater degree, that has always been true, but in the last year or so, it has become particularly abhorrent with brands like Synology, who have really attacked the concept of use the drives you want and compatibility, and what they deem the word compatibility and verified support actually means in terms of hardware. And it is something that DIY NAS users and build your own or BYO users have been looking at from the sidelines going, yeah, I don't really want any of that. There is no denying that lock-in is something that on turnkey NAS, to a greater or lesser degree, just exists. And that isn't just Synology, by the way, it exists to all of them. I include every single NAS brand, probably given a slight bit of leeway there to the likes of Asustor and Terramaster, who do allow you to install third-party operating systems on their hardware. UGREEN do that as well, but it has to be said with UGREEN, they're quite new players in the field, and I think for them, they haven't really earned the stripes to carry off that statement, but at least the other two, I'll give them leeway on that. But when it comes to QNAP, for example, who won't allow you to use that hardware with third-party operating systems, and of course Synology, who are becoming especially restrictive on their policies, it has to be said that DIY and build your own is becoming particularly appealing to users who want that sense of freedom and hardware ownership. For the longest time, if you wanted to go down the build your own server route, you really only had 3 options: Open Media Vault, TrueNAS and Unraid. Now, at different times, one has been stronger than the other. Unfortunately, OMV has fallen behind the wayside a little bit for others. But now in 2025, there are absolutely loads of NAS operating systems out there for you to play with. Alongside the big 3, you've got Rocket, you've got Houston, you've got ZimaOS, you've got third-party NAS operating systems rolling out with Chinese hardware built on things like FNOS. The range of NAS operating systems now has genuinely exploded on the scene, and a lot of them are becoming increasingly more user-friendly as they close the gap slowly in terms of the way you access them and the presentation away from the more complex elements of Unraid and TrueNAS. So no longer is DIY NASing involving you having to use particularly intensive command line access to your data. And add to that things like HexOS, that although it's a paid platform, does allow more user-friendly access to TrueNAS. And then, and I made a video about this, you've got things like ZimaOS, which is one of the best beginner NAS operating systems I've ever used, and even arrives with client tools for Windows and Mac systems that allow for not only easy access and peer-to-peer file transfers, but on top of that, even Thunderbolt 4 and USB 4 direct connectivity, something which up to that point was largely unavailable in the world of DIY NAS without a significant amount of tinkering. Bottom line, DIY isn't as complicated as it used to be. Have you seen the shiz next to me here on the table? The state of play in terms of NAS hardware right now, rolling out the gate, is phenomenal. 10 years ago, DIY NAS meant either reusing an old PC server or having to build something from scratch. And now, a lot of the work, either completely or halfway there, is done for you. You have got systems like these from CWWK, GMK Tech, and of course that B-Link ME Mini that we talked about, that are flash pre-built NAS servers ready for your own operating system, designed for 24/7 utilization. This one ever so slightly less so because it gets real hot. On top of that, you've got brands like CWWK and TopTon in China rolling out NAS-optimized motherboards like these that arrive with not only Twin Lake and Alder Lake CPUs with 10 GBE, but rolling all the way up to Intel Ultra cores that have got 10 GBE out the gate, Gen 4 and Gen 5 architecture, and CPUs pre-attached, taking so much of the hassle out of DIY. And then you've got NAS M-ATX motherboards. You have NAS-optimized cases rocking out for 24/7 use. The level of NAS optimized hardware to build your own has closed the gap significantly and has certainly undercut one of the biggest selling points of turnkey NAS solutions, that they are designed for 24/7 utilization, because so much NAS hardware has arrived that can make the same bold claim. Have you seen the cost of things these days? Whether it is that your dollars, pounds and euros don't go as far as they used to because of things like inflation, or just simply that the price of hardware over the counter has risen in the last few years, people are a lot more aware of the cost of every pound, just how much those pence spread. Now, when it comes to turnkey NAS solutions, these are big brands. They've got huge software engagement, great big, client tools and more. They are big behemoths and they have to move comparatively slow. And the result is that most of these solutions, when you buy them, you're spending a lot more on the software than the hardware. That's why the hardware you get is generally quite lackluster in comparison to these, because you are paying for that software. And software devs cost money. And therefore, more so than hardware, which is predictable and walk away, software development is ongoing. The result is that generally, even now in 2025, but also prior to that, DIY has never been better value than it is right now when you are purchasing it over the counter. I picked these 4 solutions on purpose because these are 4 of the most popular 4-bay turnkey NAS solutions in the market right now. The 925, the 464, the 424 and the DXP 4800. 4 popular NAS solutions there for turnkey around a 500 to 600 nicker mark. That, in terms of 2025 money, in terms of DIY, you will get an absolute bargain in terms of hardware. That would buy some insane pre-built M.2 NVMe solutions or some heavy scale-up DIY MITX solutions. With that, you can still buy the case, buy the PSU, buy the memory. You can get all of that and get a heftier, more powerful machine if you choose to. And thanks to that DIY NAS software, a lot of them being free over the counter, it gets even better. So basically, in terms of value for money, DIY has never been more appealing. But DIY ain't perfect for everyone. And even in 2025, turnkey NAS solutions have their appeal, even from die-hard IT vets deep in the DIY ecosystem. Let's talk about 4 reasons why you either want to stick with or choose to go turnkey. I'm easy like Sunday morning. For all of my talk of the changes and improvements to DIY and build your own NAS software, and particularly the number of different variations of software that have arrived, there is simply no denying that they are still nowhere near as user-friendly as turnkey NAS solutions. And of course, we've got to call out Synology and DSM. They're still the most user-friendly platform out there, but still, even outside of that, QNAP software, Terramaster software, Asustor software, UGREEN software, all of these platforms arrive with really user-friendly software. Sometimes you still have to dig into the weeds a little bit, but because it's a paid premium solution, you tend to find that the brands themselves have got a lot more money to throw at presentations, throw into the UX, throw into the GUI, and ultimately present a much more user-friendly platform compared with that of DIY that is generally being run by a smaller team of software developers and a lot of community support. More on that later on. But the result is that going DIY, although the learning curve has gone down a little in the last few years, it's still a much steeper learning curve than going turnkey overall. And if that intimidates you, if you're not prepared to spend the time to learn, or you don't think you'll benefit from what is frankly sometimes a very educational experience in learning DIY, then turnkey, to save you time and perhaps save you money, will always be the better option.
I'm easy like Sunday morning.
And nowhere is the benefits of turnkey in terms of time saving and lower learning curves more present than when it comes to applications. Applications fall into two categories: client applications on the device that you're choosing to use, and applications that are installed within the service. And in turnkey NAS, good God, it's easy. Let's start with that first one. Depending on the brand you go for, but definitely more so than turnkey, there are so many different NAS applications for iOS, for Android, for smart TVs, for so many devices, right the way down, of course, to your Windows and Mac and Linux systems. Depending on the brand, the range is just enormous, and it means that you have a much more tailored and a much more native access and user experience with your NAS. Right now, depending on the brand you go for in terms of DIY, the number of client applications either go down to you have one app, or you have no apps and you have to use third-party apps, introducing potentially a third-party actor into your workflow, which isn't going to be desirable to everyone. But that extends, of course, to the applications inside these systems, because the majority of these NAS brands in turnkey arrive with one-click installs for apps, just one click, and easy permission assignment, easy user access, easy system access, and declining read-only and more. All of it built natively, and so many apps are just one-click install. Now, depending again on the DIY BYO NAS operating system you're going to use on your DIY, there is some of that, but not much. Even things like HexOS, one of the reasons it's selling itself as a true NAS add-on is because it allows you to one-click install apps. And they've only got two right now, two apps, Plex and Image. Overall, DIY still requires a lot more refined container adjustment, which you might like, but so much of that is streamlined on the native user experience on your client and within the device itself in turnkey. And if that sounds appealing to you, you're still not going to get that in a hurry on this platform.
I'm easy like Sunday morning.
Security management and the ease of sharing. Now, this is going to be a blanket statement. Please don't flame me in the comments. Hear me out first. I am not suggesting that turnkey is just safer. It isn't. I'm not going to say it is. Nothing is 100% bulletproof, but I will say that security management and sharing files is so much easier on turnkey NAS solutions. Some of the BYO DIY NAS solutions that I've talked about so far do use relay servers and peer-to-peer transfers built into their platforms there. They also provide support of things like Tailscale and other remote access encrypted tunnels and portals in order for you to share files easily and maintain anonymity and security on your DIY NAS platform. However, turnkey just does it easier, just allows for it to be so much more of a simplified process while simultaneously giving you the options to set your own. And it is that choice that's really, really important when it comes to sharing files, but also accessing your server remotely securely and not just punching a hole in your firewall. BYO and DIY doesn't do that. You know, the punching holes through firewalls, it allows you to do it, but you don't have to do that. But there's just a much more streamlined sharing experience on the DIY, on the turnkey NAS solutions than BYO and DIY.
I'm easy like Sunday morning.
And this is the one that I hear the most, more than anything else, because any of the other points I've raised right now about why DIY might not be for you are debatable, and I'm sure it's been debated now in the comments. But the support is something we have to discuss, and that is when it comes to the majority of DIY NAS solutions, and if you go down the DIY NAS route, the support is almost exclusively community-based unless you pay otherwise. You can go to things like Unraid and TrueNAS where you can pay for premium support. That option's there, but the majority of the support does come down to community. It does come down to smaller knit users either doing it in their own time or smaller groups of paid people providing that support, but they're smaller teams. Whereas turnkey NAS solutions generally have a much more larger coverage. And again, it differs from brand to brand, but the amount of support you get will generally come from larger teams. Generally, you have more regions available, so depending where you are in the world, you will get your own regional or country-based support in your own language of choice. And because it's a paid platform and because they're trying to keep people in an ecosystem long term and get recurring customers and therefore returning revenue, it is very much in their interest to keep their end users happy. Are they perfect? God, no. I could find a list of examples where different support teams from all of these turnkey NAS brands have dropped the ball and est the bed. But on the whole, you generally find faster and better support from turnkey overall. Again, that is a big blanket term, but when it comes to the support you need and how much time you want to spend searching for answers, you will generally find a much more direct point of support on turnkey than you will on DIY or BY. It doesn't necessarily mean you'll get the answer, but it means you get a faster, a much more direct level of support on this side of the table than you will on the other. But this is now the time to switch to DIY. I am sure there has been some contentious points in this video that you're not going to like, and I'll talk to you about it in the comments. But if you have enjoyed this video, and if any of the stuff I talked about today interests you, from products to services, please use the links in the description in order to get these for you. If you use those links, it results in a small commission coming to here at NASCompares. It's just me and Eddie doing this. We run the support, the YouTube, the websites, the guides, the reviews, the works. And although ad revenue supports what we do, you can, support us on Patreon and Ko-Fi and stuff like that. But let's face it, no one really likes doing that. Using those links in order to buy anything and getting us a commission costs you nothing, and it allows us to keep doing what we do. So use those if you like, but you don't have to. Control T and go to your shop of choice. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.